Hi, I'm Cliff Thomas. I'm the Executive Director of Life Renewed Counseling. And the following video is a conversation between one of our therapists, Priscilla Colesgard, and the pastor at Lakewood Presbyterian Church, Reverend Joy. And it's a conversation about relationships and some of the things we do that enhance our relationships with others and some of the things we do that detract from those relationships. I hope you enjoy the following video, as I know I did when I watched it.
Hi, I'm Pastor Joy. I am the pastor of Lakewood Presbyterian Church, and I am with Priscilla Colesgard today. She is a therapist at Life Renewed Counseling Center, and today we are going to talk about something that I know is important to all of us, and that is relationships. And relationships are a wonderful thing, and they are also really difficult. We know that every relationship involves two imperfect people, whether that is a marriage relationship or just friendships or people that you know in your congregation or wherever at work. And we're all imperfect people trying to relate to other imperfect people. So sometimes conflict arises. And that can be a source of stress and anxiety in our lives, or anger, as we've talked about. So Priscilla, what kind of things do you have to say to us today about having healthy relationships, some practical advice about how to do that when we're finding that a particular person or relationship is challenging us?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it's important to remember that it's normal, that no one's alone in having, these conflicts within relationships, whether it's parents or kids or spouse or friends or anything. And I think, as we talked about before, technology, I think sometimes that's further distanced us and kind of made these little bubbles for us to escape to, and, escaping in these technological relationships without having to kind of know and have the tools to deal with people in person.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think it's normal to have conflict. I think God uses relationships a lot in terms of growth and to sanctify us. So it's a learning curve for sure. I think that there's a few things that we do in relationships, again, like no matter kind of which relationship it is, that can cause conflict. I think one thing is just having unrealistic expectations, whether we don't know that we're putting that unrealistic expectation on someone, or not, and having these assumptions that come along with that this person should be this thing that they're not, or having an idealized version of someone and they can't live up to it, expecting them to fill this role that a lot of times only God can fill and they were not meant to fill. There's this concept that therapists use called shadow dancing, which is another idea with people in conflict, where oftentimes we can relate to our projection of someone rather than that person. So what we expect that person to say in an argument, and we're already kind of creating our own defense before they even say anything to the thing that we think they're going to say. So we're 5 steps ahead of where they're actually at. So that can kind of obviously cause conflict because we're not giving the person a chance to say what they're going to say. We're not giving them the benefit of the doubt. And so we end up sabotaging because we're not really understanding. We're not really listening. Also, a lot of times people focusing on right and wrong. So rather than thinking about the emotions, thinking about the feelings about, oh, well, it was really, X, Y, Z, and it was yesterday, not today. Rather than thinking about the big picture of what you're arguing about, getting stuck on these little details, and then focusing on the problems, not, considering the positives and the possibilities for your relationship and getting stuck on everything that's going wrong and everything that they're doing wrong.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm taking away from what you're saying is that if you're experiencing conflict in a relationship, I think what we naturally want to do is look at the other person and everything they're doing wrong and everything they need to do to fix it. And what I hear you saying in these is that maybe one of the best ways to work on improving our relationships is to look at what we're doing in the relationship, our expectations that are wrong or unrealistic or things like that. So yeah, maybe a big thing toward helping with conflict in relationships is turning it back on ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a few different ways to fix this. And obviously there's so many different situations. So these are kind of, a few general ideas to take home with you. I think one thing is to listen to understand, like you were saying, instead of kind of blaming and focusing on the person, trying to understand the other person, trying to
Yeah.
get in terms of where they're at, what their feelings are. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. Understanding someone, you could be the furthest thing apart, whether that's, in a relationship, in terms of a fight, in terms of politics, anything.
Yeah.
But trying to understand from their perspective where they're coming from, having empathy. And we're going to talk about that in a later session, specifically about how to empathize with
Yeah.
people. And also just the idea that, other people's feelings don't necessarily negate your own. You can understand someone else and think about someone else and what they're going through without it meaning that your feelings are invalidated. Another thing is to reorient yourself to the positive, like I was saying. So trying to remember what's the good in your relationship, what's the good in the person in front of you, and trying to remember those factors so you can see them as a whole person
Yeah.
rather than just these, things that are really, really frustrating you in
Yeah.
that moment. Having fondness for your kid, for your spouse, for your friend in these situations, not sticking them in this bubble. Even using language like always and never that puts them in this, little box that they can't get out of. And then also just picking your battles. So from, one situation that means literally choosing, am I going to fight about this or not? Am I going to
Yeah.
let it go? If you're having an argument with someone, if you can't talk through it rationally, if you can't think through it rationally, that's not the time to have an argument.
Yeah.
It's only going to get worse.
That is so true.
And there's going to be things that you regret saying, and it's just going to make the whole situation and relationship worse. So
Yeah.
taking the time to take a break, step away from it, and then come back to it and talk
Yeah.
about it when you're able to,
Yeah.
like a rational human.
I have a friend on that has she told me she has like a 36-hour rule. So anytime there's something with her husband that is really bugging her, whatever, she makes herself wait 36 hours to see if it's still bothering her or if she's just calmed down enough to be
Yeah.
able to talk about it. And it's hard to do, but I think that's really helpful. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that's saved them a lot of blowouts.
Yeah, and I know, Jacob was saying earlier in terms of anger and anxiety, how, we can get really stressed and we cannot think, with our prefrontal cortex. Then all the things that your spouse is doing, your kid is doing, escalates that. So being
Yeah.
able to take that time to, decompress and think can a lot of times make those little stressors seem not so big
Yeah.
in that moment too. And then, another factor in certain situations is recognizing that you can be right or you can have this relationship.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. So, realizing that, sometimes you can think I'm the right person in this situation and we're disagreeing on this, but I still want to keep this relationship.
Yeah.
And that means being able to let that go to the side so I can keep this relationship.
Yeah.
And that's a decision that, you might have to make. And obviously with all of these, I just want to clarify, if there's any situation where there's abuse happening, where there's violence happening, that's never okay. And these are not
Right.
the ways to try to work through those issues. That
Right.
requires a therapist, going to you if you're part of this congregation, going to some authorities to get that help and get that security and safety first and foremost.
Yeah, that's very true. Good point. Some relationships you need to back away from. But we are meant to have relationships. God is relational. God tells us the greatest two commandments, love God, love each other. So we're definitely meant to be in relationships. And even though it can be hard, they're meant to be something that's good for us and a blessing. So thank you for your help and your insight. And I hope this gives you some practical things to think about that'll help you as you experience conflict or some frustrations in the relationships that you have with others. So we'll see you next time. Bye.